Hello, everyone. We are cleared for takeoff into the webinar of Piloting Microsoft Copilot AI. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are Spindustry, and we've been in the business for 25 plus years, and along with our SharePoint work, we provide several other services. After today, you'll receive a link to the recording and the slides that you'll see. We do want to make a note that today our slides have a lot of videos with demos. So after the presentation, everyone will receive a PDF version of the slides. But if you would like the full PowerPoint with all the videos, just let us know and we can send you over that larger file. We just didn't want to burden anyone's luggage with the large file size. If you have any questions during today's amazing webinar, you can use the question feature. My contact information will be on the last slide of this deck, so if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Besides today's webinar, we have lots of others that are free and easy to access. You can find those on spindustry.com/webinars. My name is Kelsey, and I will be your host for today's webinar. And with me, I have Tavon Graham, who is our Senior SharePoint Developer, and Jared Edge, our Director of SharePoint Services. Jared, I will let you sit in the pilot seat and tell us what today's flight's going to be about.
All right, so I just want to say a couple of things before I read off what the agenda is for today. Because of the nature of Copilot and how it gives us different answers every time we ask a question, we wanted to make sure we made this stable. So we recorded all of our demos. We actually did the demos, but we recorded them all so we could just talk about them. And the other reason we did that is because we actually had about 2 hours of content for this when we ran through it just the other day. And we were like, how in the world do we shorten this down? We felt that pre-recording the demos would save us time from switching back and forth in computers and things like that and allow us to get 1 or 2 more demos inside of it. So we did bring it down, but we are going to be over today. So I expect that we'll run about 1 hour and 10 minutes possibly. So remember, this is recorded. If anyone has to leave at a certain time or anything like that, this is recorded and we will send you the recording to it. Let's like kind of jump into what we're going to do. So today's webinar is piloting Microsoft Copilot AI, and we assume out of the tons of people that registered for this webinar and that are kind of joining in now, that out of all of you, there are probably a few experts on Copilot. There are probably just some who want to get some tips and tricks, and then there's probably a lot of you who are kind of evaluating whether you want to turn on Copilot or whether you're ready to turn on Copilot or not. So this webinar is going to cover all those different things. So we're going to go through the different types of Copilot AI and give you some education on what this actually means and kind of demystify it a little bit for you. And so we have tons of demos to be able to do that. And that's going to be the large portion of what we do today. But then we're also going to go through, how do I make sure that we're prepared for this change in our environment? And we want to talk about some of the things you need to do to make sure that you're ready to go, like training and things like that. We'll talk about what we think is important. And then even though we did a webinar about a month or 2 ago on the governance of AI or AI readiness, we will have links in here for you for that, but we are going to not assume that everybody went to that, and we'll give you an overview and try to summarize that down into a little bit of a bite-sized chunk, give you all that information, but we'll also give you the links and such to those other webinars. They're just like this webinar. All of our webinars are free, so feel free to go and look at those and enjoy them. So we have a lot to go through, so just kind of want to jump into it. So let's get going.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. So as Jared mentioned, we've done a couple of other webinars about Copilot, and they're really great. We'll share a link to one of those other ones later. But because I can pretty much assume that not every single person was able to make it to our past webinars, can we talk first about what Copilot is? Can you all kind of give us a little introduction to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few different ways that you can really think about what Copilot is and what it means when we say Copilot. Microsoft gives us this kind of technical definition you'll see in quotes here on the screen that talks all about the power of large language models and your organization's data all in the flow of work, sitting right there with you where you're kind of used to working. But the way that I would want you to think about Copilot, if it's something that you're pretty new to, is, well, a lot of us are familiar with another program called ChatGPT. right? Just that kind of AI chatbot that we can go to and talk things out with, really get some information back from it using natural language instead of something like a Google search. Well, Copilot is kind of that same thing, but it can tap into our organization's documents. It can tap into who our contacts are, what Teams messages we send, what our video meeting recordings are, and it can pull all of that information together for us, as well as more directly helping us with things like creating Word documents or drafting up a PowerPoint presentation, or even helping us stay on top of our emails. It combines all that wonderful stuff that we want from an AI with everything that we already do as an organization.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth mentioning that, is there one co-pilot? There's always this question: is there just one co-pilot, or is there more than one co-pilot? Because I see co-pilot all over the place. I see it over in Bing. I see it in my Office 365 environment. What is this? There's an app on my phone for co-pilot. Is there more than one, or is it just one? And I don't think that's not really the important question. I mean, it's a great question, but maybe not the most important one, because you might get two different answers for that. And I don't think the answer to that actually matters to what we're doing. I think I would like you to think about it, though, as multiple ones. Whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. I want you to think of it as multiple ones because it'll help you understand it a little bit better. So, for example, there's a Copilot chat that we're going to call it Copilot chat that Tavon's going to introduce us to in just a second. But also, when I'm over inside of Microsoft Word, there's a Copilot that's tuned or understands how to work with Word. There's a Copilot that understands how to work with Excel, one that understands how to work with PowerPoint, Outlook, Microsoft Teams, and so forth. So it's been kind of fine-tuned to work with it in that way, which is why, as you'll see today, there are certain things you might ask the AI when you're inside of Word that it can't do for you, but it'll say, but if you go over to, say, PowerPoint, it'll actually do that for you. So we want to talk about that and introduce you to that along the way today as well. And then one more thing that I'd just like to mention, you'll get these slides, like we said, but there's a link down the bottom there for Microsoft 365 Copilot and the Microsoft adoption pages that they have out there. There's a lot of good information if you are as I suspect, here to evaluate when or how or the when I should turn it on or what do I need to do before I turn it on, that type of thing. There's a lot of good information over in the adoption site that kind of helps you figure that time out. And then I'll say this last thing and I'll hand it back over. So I went to the Microsoft conference and actually multiple conferences now. And here's the message that Microsoft had. Get Copilot right now. You got to have it right now. Get it, get it, get it, get it. Turn it on, turn it on, turn it on. Oh, but wait, you also might want to make sure you've done a few things in the background, but turn it on right now. Right. And so there's that hurry up, get it done because we want you to be in there and take advantage of it. But there are things that you need to have in place before you actually turn it on. They were careful to say that, but they were really excited about telling you to turn it on. So let's get started and kind of continue to jump inside of here.
Awesome. Thank you, Jared. That was a really great explanation of what Copilot is for those who might not quite have heard of it yet or really, had a definition of what it is. So I would love to jump into my absolute favorite part of these webinars, and that is actually seeing the Copilots in action. I know you guys have a lot of really awesome demos lined up for us so that everyone can really see what Copilot is and how it kind of moves and what it does. So I would love for you guys to take it away and show us those.
Awesome. All right, so here's just kind of a selection of demos that we're going to be running through today in kind of the order that we're going to talk about them. But again, note that there are some extra things we did have to cut out of this. We do have several of those recordings that you can get your hands on for those extra demos as well. But what we're going to start with today is what I'm going to refer to as Copilot Chat. Is that the real name for it? Who knows? But that's a good enough name for it for kind of what we're talking about. It's that main interface where we go to just talk to Copilot. And we'll see what we can kind of do with that. Then we'll take a look at Word and how Copilot can help us draft up a Word document or even understand our Word documents. We'll move over to PowerPoint for some help with presentations and making sure that they sound and look exactly how we want. And then we'll go into my personal favorite, which is Teams and Stream. They kind of live hand in hand in the realm of Copilot, but Copilot is really able to do some amazing things there to help us stay productive and on top of our meetings and information. And then we'll finish up with some a quick look at Outlook as well.
Awesome. And as Tavon mentioned, there's a lot. We had, again, way more content than we could fit inside of here. So again, we're going to put, we have several extra demos as well, some for developers, some about like Power BI, Power Apps, things like that. We're going to put those all in a separate video and just make sure you guys get that as well. So, all right, look for more to come.
All right, perfect. So let's take a look here at Copilot Chat, or just this Copilot for Microsoft 365 interface. So what you'll see in this demo is right now it's pulled up what we'll just refer to as kind of a prompts menu. For a little bit of context there, a prompt is just what we tell Copilot in order for it to really respond to us and give us what we're looking for. This prompts menu is a pretty amazing thing. So Microsoft, they understand that there are some things that everyone in the world is going to want to do, like, hey, summarize my emails, or help me write up a message for a coworker, or tell me what some of my outstanding to-do items are. So in this prompts menu, we can actually just click on one of those suggested prompts, and it'll put in a lot of detail for us. So here I chose one that was just summarize my emails. But if you saw up at the top there of this kind of demo screen, it actually did a lot more than tell it just with that kind of plain text to summarize my emails. Right? It went ahead and it actually included some detail about how I want its response to be formatted, how many emails it should look at, that it should pull out some quotes. I want to see some italics in there, do some bolding, separate things by date. So all of that is really important for you to keep in mind as you start going through your Copilot journey, right? A lot of times we think about Copilot as something that we'll just give a quick 1 or 2 sentences to, and it'll give us the response, and we'll call it pretty much a day. But you can go a lot deeper than that when we're talking to Copilot. We can give it all of these specifics, and it can really take that and adapt how it responds to you to meet your specific use case. Now, the next thing that you might have caught in this demo is in the kind of bottom of the Copilot interface, there's a button for what it calls plugins. Now, those plugins can be kind of one that it comes with, which is to talk to web content. It can be custom plugins that you develop as an organization, or it can be plugins that we just go ahead and actually pull from the outside world, because a lot of organizations, companies of different sizes, have made plugins to talk to their own systems. What that's all about is just letting Copilot reach beyond what it can already access, right? Maybe we want to use web content for, like you saw in this demo, to get some real-time weather information about a place like Des Moines. Maybe we want it to help us figure out what a good flight to purchase would be for an upcoming business trip. In cases like those, web content or talking to a specific service are going to be your best friend. Now, the last thing that I want to highlight from this particular video is that little plus icon in the bottom left of where you write out your chat message to Copilot. I'll refer to that as kind of the context menu, but again, technical name might be something different. That's good enough for today, though. Using that menu, we can really tell Copilot, hey, I want you to focus in on this document and give it a link to the actual document. Or, hey, I'm really looking to send a message to this coworker. Or can you respond as if you were talking about this upcoming meeting? Right? It lets us be very specific with what we're actually talking to Copilot about. And being specific is one of the best practices that you can get in the habit of when you're working with Copilot.
Tavon, I have a couple of questions around that. So we just saw pop up on the screen where you said we can enable it to be able to talk to the external web. So go outside of our information, go outside of our intranet. That may have given heart palpitations to several people sitting out here thinking, oh my gosh, is it going to take our information and show it outside of outside the organization? So my question to you is, can an admin control that and dictate what we can do as a policy inside of our environment?
Absolutely. And there are a few different ways that you can do that as kind of that admin, right? The first thing that I would point out is in your admin center, you have the option to just turn off the ability for Copilot to use web content at all. A lot of you would probably like hearing that, right? We can just decide internal only. Copilot is our tool, not the world's tool. The other thing to really keep in mind there, though, is different plugins, right? As we start to kind of go down the journey of extra plugins and building on top of Copilot as an organization, you'll really want to think about that and have some good governance around what plugins we turn on, and make sure you do your research. because Microsoft didn't build those plugins, right? If they're talking to a different service, they may or may not have to pass some data back and forth. So you want to be careful and really consider what we enable as an organization, but it can be controlled.
Awesome. So let's take a look at that prompt that it built for you, because we mentioned that a prompt is the information you're giving or asking Copilot, and then it gives you back some answers, right? So look at this prompt, and I like prompting. I'm kind of into trying to figure out, how can I do one prompt instead of continue the conversation? But it's a conversation that you're having, right? And so you not only told it, here's what I'm looking for. What you put inside of here is, when you give me back the information, formatted a certain way. And I think that's important to understand. Can you talk a little bit more about prompting?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's an art to crafting a good prompt, right? There are some tips and tricks from Microsoft that you can find out there about different things that should go into a prompt, but I'll highlight just a few of them, right? The first thing that we're telling Copilot is really, what do we want it to do? What are we hoping to get out of this whole interaction with the AI? Then we can give it some more specifics and some instructions on how we want it to go about really completing that task for us, right? Combine emails into a nice summary, go as long as you need to cover the topics, show me the date that these emails were from. All of that is just giving some more specifics to Copilot on what we really want from it. It's also worth noting that, again, you can tell Copilot exactly what it should look at, right? You should look at this meeting and give me an answer. You should look at all my meetings from the last week and give me an answer. You should format it a certain way. Being as specific as possible with Copilot is going to help us get the real answer that we're looking for. But like you said, this is a conversation, right? If it doesn't get it exactly right the first time, we can add on to that conversation. Tell it, please reformat your answer in a certain way, or can you include some information about this other topic, right? Copilot is something you can really start to see as an iterative process, not just something that's one and done.
Awesome. And we'll talk more about that as we get further into this presentation. So thank you.
Perfect. So the next thing that I have for you here is just a quick look at how to get to that Copilot chat. So I clicked on the waffle here just to show you that there is no Copilot chat icon there. Instead, what I went to here is just the Microsoft 365 home, and that's kind of the place, if you're looking for to kind of access Copilot through the web, that I would start. You can get there from Bing as well, but that Microsoft home is going to be kind of a good starting point. Outside of that, though, now we're seeing Teams. So there's two places in Teams that we can get to Copilot. First is just at the top of our chats menu, right? It's a chat with Copilot, so it lives in chats, and it's right up at the top because they know it's important. The
And,
next thing that you'll see.
and let me just toss in here that you may have a different version of Teams than we do so far. So you may not see that there, but in a week later, it might pop up. These things are changing all the time. But go ahead, Tavon.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that you'll see is, like I just clicked on there, right? You can have Copilot listed on the left-hand side of Teams as well, so we can always get to it no matter where we happen to be.
And then
And I think
as an
that's
admin,
important as well.
I could actually put that there for everybody, couldn't I? For inside of Teams.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely. All right.
perfect.
So that's kind of what I wanted to show you guys with accessing Copilot chat. Let's maybe switch gears a little bit and look at Word.
All right, excellent. So let's take a look at Word. Okay, let me set the stage for you. I want you to notice some things. I have this file, it's already created. It's sitting inside of a site that is an administrative site that only my senior leadership can get to. There's about 5 people in the company that can get to that. At the top of the screen here, you'll see that there's a Copilot icon. And I clicked on that Copilot icon. And what I'm seeing here is really the same experience that Tavon had in the Copilot chat, or what we're calling Copilot chat. And so I'm really getting that same experience, except there are some differences. And as you go from tool to tool, you're going to start seeing that this left hand or this right hand side is going to be here, but like where it says ask at the top, it's going to be a slightly different for each of the tools that I'm going to go into. So try to pick that up as I go through. Inside of here, I've got those beautiful icons down the bottom that allow me to get to Copilot Labs, so I can see all the saved prompts that I have. Because as I write more prompts, I might want to save the prompt that I did and have that sitting out here, or highlight some of these ones that are in here that were helpful to me, because I'm going to run that every week, as a nice summary for, summarize all my meetings today, those types of things. And so I want to be able to, this is a great place to go to be able to help you understand prompting and learn prompting along the way. Okay. But in my document, what I'm doing here is I have an employee that we've been secretly keeping some information about, is employee 007, who is a paleoclimatology expert. Woo, say that twice, right? And then I have some information here that leads us to believe that Kelsey Culbertson is also an expert in this area, and I think we need to do more investigation about that. So we're going to build into that. So the first thing I wanted to know, let's just say this document was 6,000 lines long, or 6,000 words long, or 100,000 words long. I just want a summary of it. So on the side there, I asked Copilot to tell me what this document is about, and it gave me a very good description of it. It says, "Hey, the document you're referring to seems to be a private file concerning an employee known as employee 007, and so on and so forth." And it also mentions that Kelsey Culbertson is probably a expert as well at this particular thing. So now I'm going to go do some more inside this document, right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to add some additional text. Now, when I do that, you're going to see a little icon on the left-hand side, the Copilot icon. I'm not going to click it yet, right? So I just put some text in here, just normal typing. So inside of a Copilot-enabled document, I can just still do the same things I normally do, just type stuff. So I put in here, we are recommending a full investigation, because you're going to see that text show up in later places. Here, if you notice, when I hover over the Copilot icon, it actually says Alt-I, which I don't want that lost on anybody. That means AI, right? That's just kind of cool. So someone at Microsoft, kudos there, right? And so it gave me a place to draft some additional information. So draft what I want. What this allows me to do is amazing. I'm going to put in here the intent of what I'm looking for. I would like a summary of Kelsey Culbertson and her skills related to paleoclimatology, please. And notice I put the please on there because I'm a very polite person, and just in case. So here, just like Tavon said earlier, I can actually click on reference file. It's a different way to show it, but I can see all the different files that I could attach to this to, again, target what I wanted to go look at, right? So if I had a resume or something like that of her, I could have targeted it toward that resume and it would go look at that. As it is, Copilot went out and created some stuff for me. Kelsey Culbertson is an employee who has some skills related to paleoclimatology, and it even told me the name of it, or what it stands for, because I didn't even know, right? The study of past climates and blah blah blah, and that's kind of cool. It also made up some stuff, which is why you need to come back and look at what it produces. Don't just take it for granted. Look at it. So why did it make up some stuff? Because this is Word. It assumed that I'm trying to be creative. It assumed that I needed help writing this stuff to make it sound really nice, and it did that for me. It went through and said, hey, it found some truth from previous meetings that we had, and saw that she was a database developer. We mentioned in earlier, like a month ago, in a meeting that we had, that she was an expert in this, and so it's latching onto that information, but it's also creating some stuff arbitrarily, right? So it gave me some information. Down at the bottom, I said I have some options down there. I can either keep this because I like it, or I can have it redo it by clicking the icon that looks like a recycle, which it'll hover over in just a second. Or I could trash this and start over again, or I can just type in some stuff, like make it formal or make it more personal or things like that, right? So I'm going to go in and say, give it some an additional prompt here. So what is it I'm doing? Like Tavon mentioned, continue to have the conversation with the AI. Treat it more like a conversation. You'll get much better results. Think of it as a person that you're sitting there talking to, right? And so just don't like talk out loud to it, because people might be watching. But still, go through and continue to feed it information. So I told it, hey, go look in our environment here and see if you find any context toward our Brazil project. which is what that meeting was about a month or two ago. And we have several documents in our system related to that. And it goes out and it's going to generate some more information inside of here. You see it added in the middle there. It says one of her recent publications is a joint paper with employee 007 on the climatic reconstruction of the Amazon basin, right? Ooh, that's really cool stuff. That is completely not true. Now, how did it get to that? The part that's not true is that she didn't work with 007. But the part that is true is that there was a report that we have on the Amazon basin and has statistics in it, and she is related to that report. So some of it's true, some of it's just, it's trying to make it sound really nice, right? So I just want you to know it from that context. Be aware that it may not always give you, the correct information, but it will help you. So let me take that in a different context, right? So I'll give you a more real world context for that. What if I wanted to create a resume for Kelsey, right? And I went to Word and I said, Word, here's Kelsey. Look up some information that we have about her in our environment and produce a resume. I also want you to include that she went to this particular school and graduated with honors. I want you to say that her thesis was well accepted by people around the world. And it would go and generate a very nice resume for you as a great starting point. And then you could polish it off and change the things that you want to change inside of it. That's what we're talking about as it goes through and helps you with your task. Okay, so let me just move that example straight into a different example. So here I'm still in that same document that I ended with, but I now need to present this to the board or to some other people, to the company. And I want them to know that we now have 2 experts in paleoclimatology, right? And so I told it to give me a PowerPoint presentation on that. And it basically said, I'll give you some bullet points for it, but I can't really create the PowerPoint presentation for you. So it did some summaries, right? And if you look at this, there's a section about 007 there. There's a section about Kelsey being amazing, another section about her background inside of there. So it is giving me good information and actually telling me where it got that information or how it arrived at that. So I really think that's super cool. And I could continue that conversation. But what I really wanted was a PowerPoint presentation. And from this dialogue, it couldn't produce that for me. Why? Because this isn't the PowerPoint Copilot. This is why I tell you to think of it as multiple Copilots. This isn't the PowerPoint Copilot. So let's jump over to PowerPoint and let's see what it can do for us, right? So at the top on the right-hand side, you'll see there's another Copilot button there, and that's cool. But I want to point out that this document that I have, I created it and I saved it in a completely different site. This is a site that everyone's allowed to get to called the Friday. That's not important to you, but it's a public site. All the employees in the organization can get to this site. And I'm about to create a PowerPoint presentation that I want to put there. Okay. So again, I've got this Copilot icon at the top, and I'm going to click on that. And it's going to give me that same dialogue. But note that the dialogue's a little bit different here, right? So before I go into that, I found that over time that if I go and create use Designer right away and create one slide with Designer on it, that Copilot will try to one-up me and make a better design for me. So you're going to really like the design. If I don't do that for some reason, it just get this weird-looking Copilot or Copilot-generated PowerPoint, but this is much better. So I took this, notice my dialogue on the right-hand side in the Copilot window is slightly different. It has things like create a presentation about, or create a presentation from a file, which I'll do later, or add a new slide about, So it's helping me learn how to work with it. So I copied the same prompt that I had earlier, and I put that in here. But I'm going to need to modify it a little bit because the prompt that I had before said, look at this document to do that. I was telling Word to look at that document to get the information for that. But here, I want it to actually go out and look for information that it can find about this particular topic. So I'm saying, hey, I want to announce that we have 2 experts inside of here, and I also want a bullet points about Kelsey Culbertson and her skills as a paleoclimatology expert. And so it's going to go out and run that, and what it's going to produce is kind of cool. Now, I'll be the first to say that I picked out an amazing presentation here, and I started out an amazing way. I was able to spell the word paleoclimatology, and I was able to put in there that we now have 2 experts that we can send to Brazil. But what it came back with just looked better than mine. It was actually, I mean, if you look at this slide, it's much, much, much better than what I had produced. Exciting news that get someone attention, right? We now have 2 experts. That's a teaser, and then it explains some of that information over on the side, which is kind of cool. So that was one way it did it, but it just created this one slide for me. What I want is an entire presentation. So I want to add in a new slide here. So I click add a new slide. I'm going to give it some more information. So add a new slide about, and I'm going to tell it what I want, and it's going to go and produce a new slide. So if you have an existing PowerPoint presentation and you just want more stuff added to it, just use this slight technique that they're showing us already, right? Which is just add a new slide. So I want more information about our experts inside of here. And so when it goes ahead and runs, this is going to add that new slide inside of here, but it's not actually going to give me everything that I want. So we're going to take a look at what it does, and then we're going to talk through doing a slightly different prompt in here. This is really, really cool stuff. And I think that anybody would be able to use this to help them, especially if you're like me. I'm not the great designer, right? I'm just not. I'm not great at laying out super cool presentations. So I need some help with it, at least to get me started. I'm pretty good at coming up with like the content for it, but I also want it to help me manipulate that content and make it more meaningful. I've often heard someone say to me, well, you have too many bullet points on there and people can't consume it that way. Well, it will help me do that. So on the side, what I'm doing now is I'm saying, hey, I click the button that says build a presentation from a document, and I told it which document it was. That is the employee 007 private information document that I have that lives over my private site. I'm telling it that I want it to wipe out what I have here and go ahead and just create the entire new presentation, and it's going to do that. But I said something that should alarm everyone in here. I said that I'm telling it to use a document in a private site. Oh boy. And I'm going to create a new document from that. Oh boy. And I'm going to put that into this public place. Oh boy. Right? And my users may not be tuned to thinking this way, right? So look at this beautiful PowerPoint presentation that it gave me based off of that other document, right? It has an introduction. It has the Kelsey's profile. It's got some information about the corporation itself. I mean, it's got a lot of information, including a conclusion at the end, which I probably wouldn't have put in my slide deck, right? So it not only told me what it was going to do, if you're looking over on the right-hand side over here, it not only told me what it was going to do, but after it told me that, it went ahead and generated the 7 slides for me, and I can use those to my advantage, which is super nice. I'm in love with what this did, and I feel like it's a great starter point for anyone who's using, creates PowerPoint presentations on a regular basis. And if you're thinking your PowerPoint presentations aren't as cool as this, then start using this, and it'll make yours as cool as this. Very easy, very simple. So let's take that and let's kind of move a little bit forward. But I want to note one more time that red flag that we have sitting there, okay? And that red flag is simply that, hey, we took private information from a sensitive document, and we're now sharing it in a public space. And we're going to address that as we continue on, and we'll get a little bit further into this, and we'll talk about that. All right. So, Tavon, anything you want to add to that? Let's go ahead and talk about what we've been doing so far and how we are talking to the AI.
Yeah, I think you covered that really well. But one thing that I do want to point out for everyone is, did you notice at the bottom of that chat, every time that we send Copilot a message, it has some suggestions for us. Suggestions about how we can keep the conversation going. Suggestions about what we can prompt it with next to get a little bit more specific or to build on what it just generated for us. Copilot and the wonderful designers over at Microsoft behind Copilot recognize that this is an iterative process. Right? I mentioned that in the Copilot chat example as well, how you can start building more and more detail. You can start asking further questions. Copilot knows that that's a central part of the experience. So whenever we're talking to it, you'll have different options to keep that conversation going. And I really suggest that you think about Copilot that way, that it's not that I sent it something and it did its job and it's done, but it gave me a response. Now I can refine that response. Now I can ask it further questions, and it'll even help me figure out what those should be. Broadly
Yeah.
speaking, right, just having a conversation with Copilot will give you better results than treating it like Google or Amazon, where we just give it some keywords and hope that it finds what we're looking for. And I say finds what we're looking for because really Copilot is built on top of search, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on as well. I mentioned as well that there are some kind of key parts of a good prompt, right? One of those is being specific. One of those is telling it how you want it to format your output. But really important as well is let Copilot know what your goal is. Somewhere in your prompt, you should tell it, hey, I'm making this presentation for this audience. Or, hey, I'm really looking to learn a little bit more about meetings this week and turn it into bullet points I can share with my team, right? Giving it the context for what it's doing will help Copilot build a better response for you, and it'll help you get more comfortable with the actual process of talking to Copilot as well.
Yeah, and please know that there's a lot of resources out there, even non-Microsoft resources on how to prompt and how to talk to an AI, right? And so there's a lot of good information out there. For example, and I like to dive into some of these things to see if I can get better answers out of Copilot all the time. And so I saw this article where this person who was a good prompter basically looked at it from a very technical side. So for everybody who's non-technical, just hang on for a second. For the technical people out there, listen in for just a second, right? So behind the scenes that this AI is nothing but a big text reader, right? It's going through consuming a bunch of text and then giving you some output about what it thinks, and it's really reacting to the last things that you gave it or the last things that it picked up. So what if you could say to it, "Hey, Copilot, give me this answer, but before giving me the actual answer, I want you to read the answer, the result that you were going to give me. Once you've done that, evaluate the result, compare, see if there's a better answer to give me, and then give me that answer instead." And this guy was getting really good results out of his prompts. It was amazing. And so I like to play around with things like that as well. But don't be afraid to do that. Learn and dive a little bit more into that. Look at some articles that are out there and just prompting in general, and that'll help you inside of Copilot's AI as well. And
Yeah,
then
yeah. In
last but
fact,
not least, oh, go ahead, Tim.
I'll let you go in just a second here, but I want to point out as well that I've actually seen entire courses and learning modules in different places dedicated to the art of the prompt, right? It's a almost a field of study that's coming about, is just how do we talk to AI to get the most out of it. So there are tons of resources out there, and it will take time to become kind of a prompt master. But I would recommend that every single one of you out there go and look at some of those resources because there's an abundance of them, and you can really become an absolute expert in talking to Copilot.
Yeah. And then after you get everything back, make sure that you are reading it. That's the most important thing we could actually say about talking to an AI is make sure whatever results it gives you, you're very much looking at. And Kelsey can testify to that the AI just makes up some stuff sometimes.
I do. In one of our meetings that we had, Copilot was really awesome and pulled out the to-dos from it. And one of the to-dos was for me to send the meeting notes to Angela and then Cinnamon the bird. Cinnamon the bird is not our company mascot or Jared's pet parrot. But we do have one of our owners of the company who we call Bird. So it was close, but like Tavon and Jared said, you need to make sure you're reading through what it's giving you before you send it out to anyone.
That's awesome. And
And
finally,
just
go ahead,
go
Tavon.
ahead, go ahead. All right,
I
just
was
one
just
more
going
little tip that we'll give you here. Oh my gosh, we're doing great right now. One
to.
more little tip I'll give you here is just be polite. So that's not just me telling you that because of the eventual robot uprising, but Microsoft even suggests in their own documentation being polite to Copilot can help it give you better results. So protect yourself in the future when Terminator happens, but also help yourself now by just saying please.
There you go. So let me throw in a quick demo real quick. I think we have enough time. Let me just fit it in here. Some of you are Excel experts. So let me just take a look at Excel. So if you are not an Excel expert, this is absolutely amazing. So once you get into the tool, I'm in the desktop version. Notice it says Copilot Preview, but look at the prompts there. Look at the items that are there. So create, edit, another edit for like sorting and filtering, and then understand, which is analyze your information there, right? So those are just some quick ways, and there's several prompts in there that you could help use. But I like this stuff at the bottom, like show data insights or suggest a couple of formulas that I might use for a specific column, or help me sort my data. So I clicked on show data insights, and quickly it gave me a result of a chart. This is a bunch of data about cars, their dealer cost, and the sales price, but it gave me a breakdown of sales price by color. It even told me down the bottom, this is what I did and why. And then here it says that I have a button to add it to a sheet. So I said, don't worry about adding it to the sheet, because there's another button down there to add all insights to a grid. And I did that instead. And that one that it gave me before is there, but look at all of this insight into that document. That is fantastic. So I'm not a great with going and making charts and making the visual piece of this, but Copilot is. And so it clicked the button and gave me the things that I wanted, and I can just get rid of what I don't need or tell it to add more. Continue to have that conversation with it, and then you're good to go. Now, I will say this, just to be fair, right, and to be transparent, I have another document that has 65,000 rows of data in it and a ton of columns that I exported from one of the federal government sites to look at data. And it had a completely hard time with getting through that. So I will say this about that. It's still Copilot Preview, right? And maybe you need to figure out how to narrow down the conversation, like only look at these fields or these rows when you're giving me this information. So be careful with that, and just be patient, because I feel like they're in the process of improving all this, and it will get improved along the way. All right, more demos. Let's do it.
All right, so let's take a look at Teams, right? So in Teams, right, we can make a whole bunch of different kinds of messages. Here, I'm just going to make an announcement. Right, I'm going to announce to our team, hey, we're going to recognize a new holiday. National Ice Cream Day is going to be a new company holiday we have off for everybody. That's pretty exciting stuff, right? I want this to be a announcement people can really get behind. Unfortunately, I'm not good at writing announcements. I don't make them sound exciting enough. Luckily for me, though, if you look down at the bottom of this kind of message box, right, we have a Copilot icon. And in just a second here, this demo is going to pull that up for us, and I'll show you a few things about that. But just like we saw with Word, right, Copilot can help us rewrite and reword and expand on the content of this text. So here with just a couple buttons, I can tell it, hey, I want this to be shorter. I want it to be longer. Or can you make this sound more enthusiastic or casual? Give me different tones for this same message. But what I'm going to focus in on here at the very bottom is custom. So again, Microsoft recognized some things that we would want, but maybe I want this announcement to sound like it came from someone else in our company. Maybe my boss, who happens to be on this webinar with us, who you might have noticed says things a little bit more verbose and excitedly than I do sometimes. So if I have Copilot try to sound like him, this announcement's going to have a totally different tone to it. The other thing that I just did here is I told Copilot, actually make that longer for me. Right? Again, continuing that conversation, iterating on what Copilot did. And you saw there that I had arrows to go back and forth as well, right? I could choose which of these results I actually kind of liked most. But in Teams, Copilot can do a lot more than just help us write a message as well. So one of my personal favorite things Copilot does for us is it can actually help us recap meetings that we've had. Right here, I've got this is Stream. So Stream and Teams live very closely together. But this is a Stream recording of a meeting that we had a few months back. I don't remember that meeting, but we have the transcript. So Copilot can look at that transcript and tell me exactly what happened in that meeting. On top of that, I'm going to ask it a follow-up question, right? Building on that chat with Copilot, were there any outstanding questions or action items that I should know about? And that's something that I personally find really helpful every single day. I don't know about you guys, but I'm in a lot of meetings, and very, very often they end up being back-to-back meetings. So just being able to go to Copilot and say, recap my meetings for the day. What are the action items I was supposed to write down? What questions did I need to send out to people from that Copilot chat interface where it can go and look at all my meeting recordings? That's something huge for me. All right. And again, down here at the very bottom, you'll see as well, right? Additional follow-up questions that we can ask. So even here, just looking at a specific recording, Copilot's trying to help us keep the conversation going.
So I would say to everyone that if you had to choose one reason of why you'd want to turn on Copilot, my one reason would be for this feature that Tavon just explained, to be able to go back to a meeting and have it recap it. So I'll give you a real world example. Our project managers are responsible for and required to send our clients a review of what the meeting was about, what tasks are coming out about that. So if someone missed the meeting, they get a recap of everything. So they've been required to do this for years. And so that process takes them about maybe 15 minutes to, polish up that email and send it over to a client. But like Tavon said, they're in back-to-back meetings also, so sometimes they don't even get around to that until late in the day or several hours later, and then they have to remember and look at their notes and read through their notes and transcribe all that over into an email and then send all of that out. Now that they have Copilot, their workflow basically is as soon as the meeting's done, wait a couple seconds or a couple minutes, and then click on the view transcript tab. It'll automatically give you an AI recap of it. But what they do is they tell it to recap it in a certain way, and then also they'll say separately, give me any to-dos or tasks that are inside of there. It writes all that up for them. They copy that, and it goes over into their email to be sent out. I imagine one day we could just say to Copilot, go ahead and create the email for me, but we'll see what happens. And so we haven't perfected that piece yet internally. So they copy and paste that over to their email, and then they send that email out to the client after basically reading it and making sure that it's good. I will tell you this much. It's been, let's just say, 95% accurate as far as what they wanted to put inside of there, right? They still read it. They're still, we still know that we need to look at it and things like that, but they very rarely have to change anything in there. Sometimes they add to it, but very rarely do they have to change anything. And that is amazing. But like I said, it does create, sometimes it doesn't hear well, or the transcript doesn't copy something really well. So they might get a name like Cinnamon Bird. And so you have to watch out for things like that. So that's the feature that I feel everyone needs the most. And it's just well worth it. All right.
And let me
So
point out one more quick thing with Teams as well, because I know we just focused on recordings and transcripts and after the fact stuff, but Copilot can sit there with you during your meeting as well, right? A lot of times people might have trouble taking notes, or people might not know exactly how to word a question that they should follow up on in real time in that meeting. And Copilot is right there to help you out and take your notes for you, help keep you on track with your agenda, all of those wonderful things you want an assistant for in your meeting. Copilot can do it.
and I could tell you 100 more things that it can do, but I'll just say this one. It can also assess the tone of a meeting, which is kind of cool, right? So you can tell if you're in a kind of the leader of that meeting, how you can you can see the tone going at a certain place, and you can actually just turn the tone around inside the meeting. It's nice that it can give you cues like that. Those are really cool things that it can do. So let's go and talk about Outlook, and then like I said, we're going to put more demos and things inside of a different video for you. But here I'm inside the Outlook, and if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that there is a Copilot icon. In some versions, that Copilot icon might be at the top. That's possible, but it should be on the left-hand side by now. I'm using the browser version of this. So, but inside it, when I click on that, I see the Copilot chat again, basically, right? We're calling the Copilot chat. And inside of here, I get several prompts that might help me with things associated to Outlook, like the calendar or task or people or mail, right? So those types of things. But it's in the context right now of Outlook, right? So it's trying to help me with those prompts that might make sense for Outlook. So I plugged in something here, which is summarize my emails for the last 2 weeks. I just want to know the important or time-sensitive things, and can you tell me what task I have inside of there as bullet points? And so again, I told it a lot of information, told it what I wanted, how I wanted it, what to focus on, and then how to present it back to me. And it did a fairly good job of going through and saying, hey, yesterday evening you had this, on Thursday, the 11th, you did this, or there's an email for this, and then last Friday, Microsoft Entra sent me an email and so forth. And then there's some tasks down at the bottom of things that I'm supposed to do, including respond to Kelsey Culberson's access request to the Friday SharePoint site, right? Which is very important stuff. So it was able, now there's a lot more junk in my email, but it was able to take a guess at what it thought was important. Take a guess at what it thought was important, right? So keep that in mind. So other things that Outlook can do for me is, again, I have this Friday site, and as I was going through it and I created a new article, it didn't post my article to the homepage. And then as I looked at it, I recognized that the rest of the articles had the word VOL inside of them and mine didn't. So when I put that in there, it fixed it. Well, I need to tell Kinsey about that so Kinsey, our developer, can go over and fix that. So I don't know what to write in here, but I'm just going to put the intent of what I want. Help me write an email to Kinsey letting her know that the Friday site has an issue that involves the VOL word, right? And I tell it to go ahead and generate that. And it's going to go through and create a dialogue for me. So here is what it gave me, right? It says, hey, I hope you find this email finds you well. That's really polite and nice, right? And it gives me a bunch of information inside of there, right, on what it should do. And that's kind of cool. But like Tavon showed me, I don't have to accept this one. I can either keep it, discard it, or retry, or I can massage it a little bit. So notice this dialogue is similar to Tavon's, but just slightly different, right? So the reason I keep telling you there's multiple copilots is because each team, so the Outlook team versus the Word team versus the Microsoft Teams team, each of those teams at Microsoft was charged with implementing Copilot in their product, but they didn't say it has to be exactly the same. Right. And I'm sure they leveraged, each other's information. So what I did is I now have two versions of that. And as you saw, I could switch back and forth between those versions, and I could come back and massage it a little bit more, right? And make it longer, make it shorter, make it a poem. But I'm not going to do that because I don't want to have to be sent to HR, right? So inside of it, it added this time the hello and the thank you. And now I have three versions that I could choose from inside of here. So I just settle on one of those and I tell it to keep it, and then it's good to go and there, right? So that's a really cool thing to have it do that. Now, let me give you a real world scenario for writing out these emails as well. So a couple weeks back, I had a really long day, back-to-back meetings, and there were some things going on, and everybody has a day, right? And so I was a little bit warmer than I should be. I won't say that I was hot because I never get hot, but I was a little warmer than I should be, right? And I needed to write an email to a specific person. And as I wrote the email, as I was writing it, like I had like 4, 5, 6 paragraphs in there, and they were like, and you should have done this and blah blah. It was a lot, right? But within that 6 or 7 or 8 paragraphs that I had, there was the true content of what I needed to say to the person. So thankfully, I looked at that email and said, oh, this is a little bit wordy and a little bit long and probably has some stuff that I don't need. And this person probably doesn't need me to shed my bad day on their bad day, on their good day. So I told Copilot to look at that email for me and make it simpler and more straight to the point. And it refined it down to a paragraph and one sentence. So one paragraph plus one sentence added to that. And it read so much better. It didn't have any of the heat that I had on it. And it was just really, really refreshing. And I think that changed the way that I looked at Copilot through Outlook. To that point, I was like, well, I can type my emails, right? But at that point, I was like, oh yeah, this is really helpful to me to put it in words that somebody else might understand, even when I think they should understand it the way I wrote it, right? So that was really cool. And Tavon, you had an experience with that as well. You had something to add on to that, I think.
Yeah. So not only can Copilot kind of, help us take the heat out of something that we ended up writing, but I think it's worth noting that Copilot can actually help us just kind of be better email writers as we write them ourselves. So one of the cool things that Copilot can do for you is you can actually have it explain why something comes off a certain way. Explain why this email sounds a little bit more heated than I wanted it to, or explain why this isn't a very exciting announcement. And I think that's something very valuable for you to get in the habit of so you can be just kind of a better communicator with the help of Copilot.
Yeah. And so let's revisit the email that I sent to Kinsey about the Friday issue. So I did that same thing inside of the chat, the Copilot chat. I wrote that same prompt inside of there, and I got a slightly different response, but it laid it out better for me as well, which is weird because I would have thought inside of the Outlook it would have laid it out better for me than this did. So I just want to let you know that try it in 2 different places and see like which one do you feel is better for you, and learn how to work that specific way. And so just wanted to show you that you could get different responses from different places. So really, really quick, for the purposes of time, I'm going to go over this next slide, which is simply to say to power users who are out here as well. So some of you are here to evaluate Copilot for your organization, your CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and you are trying to determine whether this is going to be something we should turn on, and you're trying to get a little glimpse into it. But others are some power users, and you're out here using using the environment already. And so I would say to those people that if Copilot will help you with writing code, Copilot will help you in Power BI, Copilot will help you in Power Apps, Copilot will help you in Power Automate as well. And there's lots of really cool things you can do. I won't put any of those demos inside of here, but I will put those a couple of demos in the extras that we're going to send out, so that you guys can benefit from that as well. All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those demos, guys. Those were all really amazing, and I hope it kind of piqued everyone's interest in seeing what Copilot can really do. So now I want to move on to talking about how we can make sure everyone is prepared for the change in their environment, how their team can be ready, how, brand new users can be ready. Kind of jump into how we can help everyone make sure they're ready.
Yep. And before we go there, I'm just going to say to everyone here, because I know some people have to end at the hour and need to go back to work and do things like that. But know that you will get this recording. So we are definitely going to go over, because like I said, we had 2 hours of content stretched down into as small as we could get it. And so it's going to take us a little time to talk about these next 2 topics, but you will get this, and everybody else just hang on and enjoy the ride.
All right, perfect. So thinking about kind of how we can be ready for the change in the environment, I really want to focus on the word change there, right? Because rolling out Copilot is something that I think you should see the same way that you do any other change, any other major rollout, or any other new technology that we're adding into our tech stack as an organization. It's something that we have to be really considerate over and really think about how we plan to communicate with our users and what those different kind of types of users are going to be that we need to communicate with, be it admins, end users, power users, whatever else. Making sure that we are able to tell them ahead of time, hey, Copilot is coming. Here are some cool things it can do. Here's where you're going to see it and what we do and do not approve of as an organization is only going to benefit you, right? See this as a major technical rollout, and you'll do great with Copilot.
Yeah. And
I would also,
oh, go ahead,
go
Tavon.
ahead. All right.
So
I
let
would
me just
also recommend that you consider some training with Copilot as well, right? And with training, it's not just an initial training on here's how you prompt Copilot or places you can get to it, but also think of a continuous training, right? Like we said earlier, Copilot is the kind of tool that you can always get more proficient with. It's an entire up and coming field. It's just how do I work with AI the best? So it's not something you're going to learn fully in a day. See that as something you as an organization revisit over time.
Sure. I mean, imagine just doing training on prompting, or even stretching that into, hey, let's create a community for just people who want to share how they prompt and how they work with the AI, right? So those are just important things that can help your organization going down the road. Be prepared for that. Make sure you have a plan in place for doing that along the way. And then, of course, everything changes, like Tavon said. So our anticipation is that everything not just changes, but also gets better along the way with AI, and there'll be more reasons to use it and more things to actually do inside of your environment. So we're hoping to see like the improvement of how Excel works and a whole bunch of other things, so it can do more and more and more for me every day. What I'm looking for out of my AI is for it to make my day easier by doing some of the minor things that I have to do, but doing them well is what I'm looking for in that next stage as we continue to go down the road. All right.
Perfect. Okay, so now that everyone kind of, has ideas on how they can get prepared, I want us to jump into one of our favorite and most important topics, which is governance. When everyone's turning on Copilot and getting ready to use it, what do they need to know about the actual governance of their data?
Awesome. So
All
what
right.
should we
So
consider? I'll take this first part, and then I'll turn it over to you, Tavon. So
perfect.
what should I consider as we're going through and thinking about AI readiness? Now, I want you to know that in a minute I'll show you a slide, and it has links back to our other presentation where we talked about all of this for a solid hour, just this topic for a solid hour. It has lots and lots of good information. For those who missed that and just want a recap of that, that's what we're doing right now. We'll go through some of the highlights of that and give you the important pieces. But if you could think about it being, consider all the aspects of the document lifecycle, right? Because all those are going to, AI is going to affect all of that as well. Like a document gets created, where's it being created? It gets stored somewhere, where's it being stored? Who created it? When was it created? When was it last modified? How do I share it? Who's able to see it? Do I archive it? What's the destruction? When does it get destroyed? When does it leave our organization? All that's important inside of Copilot as well. So let's break some of that down and let's talk about like location. Where I store those documents is important. Is the library in SharePoint that I put that information in, is that searchable? Right? It is, who can see it inside of there? Or do I have some archive data that is important to us, but I don't want the search to go through it, or Copilot AI to be going through it as well, because it's more historical information and not current and relevant to us in today's plan that we have for the organization. So how you divide up that data, where it's going to be, and how you secure it all, the location of those documents is certainly important. And Tavon, talk about the fact that location might not even mean SharePoint.
Yeah, so you heard me mention earlier the possibility of these plugins and extending Copilot to look at other services. We need you to keep that in mind as an organization as well. Do we have information sitting out in some other task management system that we want Copilot to see? Do we have some documents that still live on file shares we want Copilot to see? Not only plugins, but also something called graph connectors that expand the Microsoft search in general are going to be worth really, really thinking about and having a plan for as we start to roll out Copilot, right? Those graph connectors I mentioned, they extend search. Just bear in mind with Copilot, really, if you think about it in its simplest terms, it's a super advanced search, right? It lives on top of that Microsoft search. So expanding with those graph connectors your search into your other systems can also expand your Copilot's capabilities and its reach into your entire tech stack as well.
Awesome. So the next point I would say that's very important is being able to have Copilot understand the types of documents that you have and what you're asking for, and being able to take that back to be assured that, for example, a policy is a policy. If you're asking questions about SOPs, is it really looking at an SOP or a document that talks about SOPs? If you are talking about like a board packets and having it summarize board packets, does it know which ones are board packets? So how do we do that? Content types is how I add that functionality into my SharePoint environment. And so, there are maybe 15 or 16 advantages of having content types inside your environment. This is yet another one to help Copilot understand what documents are. So you can see in this example I have there that all the documents inside of here, regardless of their name, regardless of what library they were living in, they're marked as SOPs. And so if I start having a conversation with Copilot about a SOP, it will actually weight this higher and know that, yeah, I think this is an SOP because it says SOP on it. So data classification and those efforts are helpful, not just for Copilot, but definitely for Copilot as well. Then there's also metadata. So you see in this same example here, I have columns inside of this library. That's all metadata. It's helpful. It enriches the search. And if it enriches the search, it enriches the ability of Copilot to be able to find things and make meaningful judgments about those things to bring it back to you as well. But there's also a thing called managed metadata, which is also important, where you are controlling your metadata inside of there, which is, again, super important to be able to take this tactic and put it inside of your arsenal of things you do inside of your SharePoint. So I will say it this way. If you're not using content types in your environment, and if you're not using managed metadata in your environment, you have room for growth inside of your environment. Content types are a number one best practice. Metadata is like a secondary best practice that should be in everyone's environment that would help any organization, no matter what your size is or how many people you have or how much data you have. It's not going to matter. This is going to be beneficial to you.
And let me point out one more quick thing here about this managed metadata. You can see in this screenshot, I know it's a little small, but we have a place for what we call synonyms with our managed metadata, right? And that's something that enhances search And that's also something that'll help out Copilot. In this case, we're looking at a term here in this managed metadata called human resources. But our company also might refer to it as something like grow people or personnel and training, all these different synonyms that you see here. And that's something we want Copilot to really understand. If somebody from another part of the organization never uses the words human resources, they just refer to it as something like grow people, how do we get Copilot to understand what they mean? And that's going to come from this metadata and these synonyms.
Awesome. So let's talk about retention, right? So imagine, so being able to remove documents from your active environment and put them either in archive or just get them completely out of your system and delete them, right? Depending on your policies that you have inside your organization, that's important. So I know that there's a lot of companies out there that, because we run across them all the time, that have a policy of let me just keep everything. I would say first you need to go talk to a lawyer or talk to your legal department about you holding on to everything forever, right? And so that'd be important for you. But let's just give you a use case, right? So let's just say that I have a policy on the Friday jeans policy, and it has been around for 8 years. So this document has been there for 8 years. People have gone and opened this document for 8 years. A lot of traffic over the 8-year period of time. We recently changed that policy and we got rid of it, and we have a brand new policy on the Friday jeans policy, and it's a completely different document in our environment, right? And so if the old one is still around, let's say after a year and a half of having the new one, right? That old one is still around, and you ask a question about the Friday jeans policy and it goes over to your policy center because you had it directed there, but you're holding on to all those documents still. Which one is it going to grab? The old one or the new one? Will it go in favor of this one is newer than the other one? Or will it go in favor of how many hits the old one had versus how many hits the new one had, right? So I don't want that decision to be up to the AI. I'd like my retention policies to remove things that are no longer relevant and active and put them somewhere else, either an archive somewhere like Microsoft Archive or a SharePoint site that's not being searched, or delete them if its time is up. So I know that you have policies out there for contracts, how long should hold those, or things that you need to be audited on, and how long should those be here, having that requirement. So retention has a lot of purposes, but could help you with AI as well by moving data out of the way that doesn't need to be active in there. Okay, so let's talk about sensitivity, which kind of ties a little bit into that. But actually, this sensitivity ties back to our example that we had earlier in the presentation. I created a Word document in a private site that only 5 people have access to, but I used that Word document in the creation of a PowerPoint presentation, and I put that PowerPoint in a place where everyone could see it. Uh-oh, red flag, red flag, red flag. That data that was in that document was supposed to be sensitive. And because I had permissions to get into, I'm one of the 5 that could get into that site to see that private document, it let me go ahead and map to it, create the PowerPoint, and put that PowerPoint wherever I wanted to. Nothing stopped me. Because security alone, permissions, does not prevent me from being a person who has permissions to do it. Doesn't prevent me from creating new artifacts and placing them somewhere, or having the AI create those artifacts on my behalf and placing them somewhere, right? So it doesn't stop me from doing that. Sensitivity labels are important to an organization because if I had marked that original document as sensitive and put rules around it that said, we don't really want anyone's eyes outside of the senior leadership to be able to see that, right? Or that document has to live on this site and can't live somewhere else, like put some rules in there like that, sensitivity, mark it as sensitive. When I create the new document based on that, AI is smart enough to know, well, I got that from a sensitive document. I'm going to apply the same sensitivity label to it. And that's what I want in my environment. Look, you guys are already paying for Microsoft Purview, which helps you do retention and sensitivity labels. Okay, you're all paying for it. So I would say if you're not using it, time to start using it. If you don't know what it is, time to investigate it so that you can start using it. I think way earlier in the year we did a webinar on Microsoft Purview. So maybe go back and look at that to give you a ramp up on what that is and how it can help you. Tavon, you want to close it out here? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, before we get into our last thing, which is going to be security, let me point out one more little piece about sensitivity, and that's something that we refer to as trainable classifiers. Maybe what we're having Copilot help us create didn't actually come from a sensitive document, or it's not being stored in a place that we already marked as sensitive, but it has some really important and sensitive data in it, like it's got a bunch of credit card numbers or people's social security numbers. Wouldn't it be nice if our system could already figure out, hey, this document looks a little sensitive, so we're going to apply a sensitivity label to it? These are things that Purview can do for you. And I won't go super in depth on how, but just know that that's a possibility and something really worth looking into.
Awesome. So finish up this portion here, Tavon, talking about security.
All right. So you heard mentioned just a second ago that being one of those 5 people who had access to that sensitive document, we were able to get Copilot to actually look at that for us. And that's something very, very important for any organization out there. Copilot, it likes to act as if it's you, right? It likes to run in the context of whatever user is talking to Copilot. To put that another way, if I, Tavon, in my account, don't have access to a file, when I, Tavon, am talking to Copilot, Copilot won't have access to that file. Right. And that's something that's, again, really important to bear in mind because a lot of organizations don't fully understand their own security or don't fully recognize how many people might have access to sensitive documents or things that they shouldn't be able to see. Just because I didn't know that I could access a document that tells me how much everyone in the company is being paid doesn't mean that Copilot won't know it, right? It has full access as if it was me. So before you ever turn on Copilot, one of my strongest recommendations to all of you would be get a handle on security. Have some good audits run to figure out who actually has access to what. Make sure that if you've got a bunch of broken permissions on things, it's not things that are going to be super sensitive and those people shouldn't actually see for Copilot. Make sure that, our security posture is something we understand, we can maintain, and we can easily control. Because it's already important in the world of SharePoint, but when AI gets involved, it's 100 times more important.
Yeah. And let me add to that a little bit. Not just so I can have the last word, but just because I want to add something into it. We do audits all the time of environments, and sometimes we find 2 things. One, where a company might have some SharePoint sites that are secured by obscurity, okay, not actual permissions in there. It's just people don't know the site exists, right? That's not going to help you with AI because AI will be able to see that stuff, and all of a sudden they'll be getting information that they didn't know they had access to. So that's something you need to be careful of, and that's targeting like people who have a site that has this gigantic library on it where they split it into a bunch of folders and they thought they were breaking permissions on all the folders, but some of the folders don't have the right permissions on them, and more people can see stuff than they're supposed to be able to see, but they don't know it's there, so they never go there, so it's never been a problem. But now it's going to be a problem if you turn on Copilot, because Copilot will know that they have access to that and will be able to go look at that stuff to find information. We want to be careful of that. If you have that model, let's think about redoing that model. The other thing I find is Microsoft Teams sometimes becomes an issue as well, because you're using Microsoft 365 groups and you don't have any special way to be able to audit it. Some of you might, but most of you are not. You're not auditing those sites because you took on a policy of, hey, let's go ahead and just let anybody who wants a Microsoft team go ahead and give it to them. And we assume that they're doing what they want to do with it. And then they're storing documents there. And you never know who you're allowing them to invite people to it. So I asked this question. Do you know what's on every one of those Microsoft teams? If the answer is no, you have a problem that you need to investigate before turning on Copilot. If I asked you, the second question is, do you know who has access to each of those sites, right? If you don't know that, you have a couple of problems and you need to go ahead and take a look at that. So who has access to it, and what information is residing on those sites? Those are the 2 things that you want to make sure you're looking at before you turn on Microsoft Copilot, because again, it will have access to that stuff. So that should be in your normal governance. But listen, like I said, we did a webinar. Here's the link to it, but you'll get this, so you'll have the link to it. We'll send it over to you. And it was called Copilot AI and Data Governance. Are you ready? And it goes through all those things we just talked about in much greater detail, showing you some of the tools as well that are in there and giving you demos of how some of that stuff works. So if you need that, go ahead and grab that. Or if you have specific questions, go ahead and reach out to us about those things. Wow, that was a lot of stuff.
That was, but it was all really, really great stuff. But now, since we're already over on time, I want to have you two jump in and kind of give us a summary of what we talked about today.
Awesome. So we hope that what you received out of this is a visual of what the different types of Copilot are and kind of maybe demystifying that. We hope that you can see that it kind of is one Copilot, but implemented differently into each of the tools as you go along. So the things you learn to work with one are going to work in the other, continue the conversation, those types of things. But there's going to be unique things that each of those tools can do or may do better than, say, a different tool. So Word may not create a PowerPoint for you, but PowerPoint can create a PowerPoint for you, and so forth, right? So we hope you received some of that out of there. We also hope now that if you're here, you came here to look at what's possible and do we really want to turn this on and how would I go about getting my organization prepared for this? We hope you saw some of that inside of here as well. And then finally, we hope that you were able to receive some of the governance ideas that we have. And we want you to be able to go back and look at that other video and get all of that information. And hopefully you got enough from us to understand that it would be good for you to go watch that other video as well. So that's what we hope you received out of this. It's always our pleasure to do this. I know that we are way over time. So what we're going to do here is we note that there's like 30 or so questions sitting in here. We are going to answer every single one of those questions. We'll do that separately from here. We'll let everybody go today. We will do that separately. And what we'll do is send that out to everyone. So if you were a member if you came to this webinar, you will get that in your email, a link to be able to see all the questions get answered for you. All right. So Kelsey, I'll let you go ahead and close this out.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Jared said, we will put out a follow-up video that everyone can get the questions that they had answered. And then again, if you would like the full slideshow with all of the demo videos in it, you can get in touch with us and let us know and we'll get that sent to you. Otherwise, everyone else will just get a PDF file that's a little bit smaller. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.